Okay, good evening. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Finance to order for Tuesday, October 15th, 2019. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We've got a pretty full agenda tonight, but the first thing I'd like to do is to invite the Superintendent of Schools, our new Superintendent, Dr. Addley. He is asked to speak to us briefly and introduce himself, and I think that's a good idea. Give us a chance to get to know him and maybe kick off the process of having an iterative discussion around budgets and spending and priorities for the coming year. That budget process is going to be starting sooner than we would all like, given that happy time of year. But having Dr. Addley here in his new role as Superintendent of Schools, I think is terrific. Welcome, Dr. Addley. Thanks for coming. The podium and microphone are right up there.
Thank you.
So the purpose of this discussion will be obviously to hear from Dr. Addley, but also to give you all a chance to ask any questions and get acquainted with him. We'll be seeing more of him as this process rolls forward. So we're grateful that you came here, and to Tara Ockman and the rest of the Board of Education for supporting us. So thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, John. Mr. Chairman and member of the Board of Finance, and I'm delighted to be here this evening as I sort of do my rounds a little bit and getting introduced to the special town of Darien, to members of the public who are here. I'm delighted to be here. My wife is with me, obviously, and it's wonderful to relocate down to this area of the state. Transportation and commuting isn't that easy, but that's something you just get used to down here. But I'm very, very excited to be here. I was thrilled to be here. From the start of the process, the professionalism of the Board of Education through its process, and Darien is a very special place for those. Sometimes you don't appreciate a place until you step outside of it a little bit and you look inside. But looking at, from the outside in, please know that this is a very, very special place, held in high esteem across the state of Connecticut. You don't get too many opportunities to lead and be part of a premier school system in the state and across the nation. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity. I look forward to that as we move forward. And I want to extend a very sincere words of appreciation to not only members of this board who have extended themselves, starting with the chair, but also to different members of the community who have been extremely hospitable in reaching out and giving myself and my wife a very warm welcome to town. So to everyone, thank you for that. I'm excited to be here and looking forward to it. I will say that there are many special things about the public school system, and it starts with the students first and foremost. You have special kids here, and special families, as you know, engaged families, as you know. I will say to you that your biggest commodity that you have are exceptional teachers. I think you know that. I've met with many members of the community over the summer, people who have relocated here to town, and it's probably not surprising to you that people do relocate to towns because of the school system. When I talk to kids in the library, I've shared this a couple of times with people. Every time I ask kids what's special about Darien school system, and all the students say they're teachers. So I look forward to honouring all of those rich traditions that people have contributed to over the years here, and the special things about Darien public schools, but also to build on those traditions as we move forward. And I look forward to, in all honesty, I look forward to providing some continuity of leadership. I think that's very helpful and beneficial for the school system and also for the town. And I look forward to partnering with all the members of the boards and the policy makers throughout the town in that effort.
Terrific. Well, we're appreciative that you're here this evening. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Addley?
I'd like to know where you're from in the Republic.
Well, that would be difficult because I'm from the north. I'm just saying.
An Ulsterman's okay.
An Ulsterman is okay, yes. I'm from a wee place called Carrickfergus in County Antrim, the north of Ireland. If anybody watched the British Open, that was my home golf course, at Dunluce Golf Course. So it was a very, very special place.
Yeah.
Right. So did we mention the tradition of complete subservience to the Board of Finance? Is that one of the, I want to make sure that's noted in the minutes. So anyway, no. But we're very happy to have you. One of the things that would be great is that as you get a sense of some of your budget priorities for the coming year, Anytime you'd like to have a dialogue, to come by and tell us a little bit about that and give us a heads up in terms of some of the things you'd like to see changed or maybe invest in the coming year. That's always something I'm sure someone who's new to this role would look at doing. So we'd love to hear from you as part of that. But we'll definitely stay in close touch as our process moves along and make sure we have a good iterative dialogue with you as these budgets and numbers develop.
Sure. I look forward to collaborating closely with Mr. Chairman and the various boards in town, and obviously with my own Board of Education. I think that's important. Like most people, I don't like surprises. Board chairs and sitting chairs of different committees don't like surprises. I don't like surprises, so in turn I try not to create surprises for people.
Right.
As I've walked around the district, there are things that I've observed. It's wonderful to have a new Oxridge Elementary School be part of that. That's just absolutely tremendous. But I also walk around and I see my portables and other things that will, over time will get a wee bit of priority.
You think he's hinting at spending money?
I'm just. I said you didn't want any surprises, so I'm just. I look forward to the board. The board is, if you don't know, is engaging in a process of strategic planning, and I think that will be helpful to both the Board of Education and the school system, and actually the community in general.
Terrific.
John, I'll just add, this is my, it's not a valedictory, but it's just my last meeting on the board.
That comes later.
Oh, congratulations.
We'll get to that. But I would commend you, Dr. Addley, and welcome, of course.
Thank you, sir.
Like Stormont, we want to look at.
That's pretty good now. Did you say Stormont?
I'm trying to work.
Okay.
But I'm trying to
Thank you, sir.
make a point that we're not the exchequer. And I want you to think around how we can really work together. It's over my period of time on the Board of Finance, it's waxed and waned to extremes with some tension. And I think all of that can be ameliorated easily by just getting to know each other. And you seem to be very approachable. You're getting high grades already. And I think to the Board of Education, our chair is a terrific chair, and to you, we just need to have continued comity and allegiance to doing the right thing together. And I think if we start off on the right foot, we're going to have a great run.
I think the board's committed to that, and innately that's who I am.
Standard. Jim, Paul, anything? Okay. Well, Dr. Addley, thank you so much for making time to come and speak to us. We look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, next up on our agenda, discuss and take action to increase the appropriation for the town hall generator. Jennifer?
During the budget process, DPW had originally put in a request for $50,000 for additional funds for the generator. And Jen tells here, he can get into the specifics of why the additional funds are needed. But at the time, the Board of Selectmen recommended, and then the Board of Finance actually removed it with the intention of bonding that along with what we were already bonding for the project. So DPW now has a solid estimate, and they are here to request the increase in appropriation and the bond authorization to give it.
Okay. I only had two questions. One was for the additional, so this it started out at $250,000, we're now at $325,000, so that additional $75,000, was it simply that the components of the bid were just more expensive than anticipated, or was there something incremental to that? Could you talk a little bit about that?
There was a little bit of added work that we put into doing the entire project, not just the generator, if you will. There's a piece in there we're working with Eversource to clear out a transformer room down there. A fourth transformer outside is going to be removed, and everything will be placed with just one transformer outside. That room inside is going to allow us not to have to build a room for the switch gears and everything we're going to use there. But we do have to close it in and prep it a certain way. Also, there's some site work that needs to be done above and beyond what would have been needed for a natural gas generator. I want to drop the diesel tank low enough so we're not any higher than the natural gas generator would have been. Try to keep the eye line the same height. So there's some modifications to that. We have some piping work to do. There's a connection for the fire, a dry fire hydrant outside that needs to be removed and replaced. So we do have some added work. It wasn't in the original estimate. We did get into it more and more with Eversource. Originally, we spoke with them. There was going to be a cost of somewhere between $20,000 to $25,000 for them to do their work, something we would have to pay up front. Past the initial stages of design, past preliminary, we met, it was down to close to around $10,000. And just recently, after we had put in this request, we had met for a kickoff meeting after we had gotten the bids, and Eversource came back and decided that they wouldn't charge us to do this. So there is a little bit of money in there that I probably won't be using, but I didn't want to change anything, so we're in the middle of the process. There is a good opportunity that I'll be coming in under 325. I'm hoping to do way below that, but that is my target.
My other question was just surprising to see that this was going to be a diesel generator as opposed to a gas-fired generator, especially since we have the gas line there. Just kind of what was the rationale for that choice or decision?
Absolutely, a very good question. If anybody knows my background, I come from the gas industry. I was there for a couple of years. I know that is the most efficient, cost-effective way to do and run buildings. Generators, on the hand, are a little different creature. The cost differential, once you get above 250 kW, they grow exponentially, and they grow towards natural gas. So it was additional $75,000 to $80,000 just for the unit, and $20,000 to run the pipe.
For it to be gas fueled.
To be natural gas instead of diesel, and an additional $20,000 to run it from the corner of the building by the gym all the way over to the place we're going to put it on the south side of the building by the transformer where it is now. All welded pipe, all inside, all have to be inspected and x-rayed. That additional $100,000 I did not believe was an expenditure that is well defined and needed to be spent on this generator. I think by the time we use it and the times that we could use it, I do believe diesel would be fine for this, for our facility.
How much diesel fuel capacity will you have in that tank, expressed in terms of how long the generator would run?
2,650 gallons.
Okay.
And it will run at 100% load for 3 full days. There's no way this building will ever use 100% load for 3 days without a power. You got to drop everything down. You may be running at 50. We should get somewhere between 4 to 6 days without me having to refill. And if I needed to refill, I have a carrier for fuel. I could pull from the diesel tank over at the DPW to refill us if I couldn't get diesel delivered to the building. That would be a weak storm. A full week of you can't move. They're rare, but they could happen, so I've prepared for that.
Then I can charge my iPhone, right?
You'll be able to come and charge your iPhone, that's correct. In any office, not
To
just
make sure
mine.
the real interests of our constituents are being addressed. Any questions for Ed on this?
The fuel tanks, are they subterranean or above ground?
They are below grade, but not underground.
Okay.
I've taken part of the hillside over there, and we're going to actually dig it out and put the tank in below, and then I'm going to build a wall around it and put the topography back so you can't see the whole thing. It'll be screened with fencing, with privacy slats. It'll also have screening with arborvitae around it, so that it's screened from the public and from any of the neighbors.
Once this is appropriated, how long before from procuring the equipment to actually ready to go?
With the hopes that the RTM would approve it on the 21st, we'll be digging that week to run the new lines. We're going to run a new service line into the building.
Okay.
So that's the start. There is a 6 to 10 week lead time for the transfer switches and all of the gears. There's also a 10 to 12 week lead time on the generator. We're not going to be ready for that generator until probably January anyway. With the hopes that the weather is good, I hope to finish it then. If not, we will wrap this up in April when the weather is good.
Other questions for Ed? All right, so for this, since we pulled this before, we actually need to vote on and pass along to the RTM a new resolution appropriating these funds. So this one will be a resolution to amend the resolution adopted in June of 2017, authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes in the amount of $250,000 to increase the appropriation and bond authorization by $75,000 to $325,000. So can I get a motion on that resolution? Paul, Senator? All in favor? Okay, 6-0. So we will, recommending that goes to the RTM for a final appropriation. Thank you, Ed, I appreciate it. Okay, next up, we have a couple of transfers to go through. Jennifer.
The first one is for Noroton Fire Department, and we have a couple of representatives here explaining their need to replace a motor for the fire pump on the fireboat.
Okay, Bobby, nice to see you, sir.
How are you?
I'm great.
Good. So, long and the short of it, the fireboat motor that drives the fire pump, which is completely independent of
Do you
the
have this
outboard
effect
motors.
on people, that they just kind of,
The fire pump has its own motor that drives the pump. It's independent of the two outboard motors that drive the boat itself. That motor has gone and served its useful life. It has essentially died. This will be the third replacement of it. The boat is 30 years old, as well as the pump. And the manufacturer, it's Westerbeek, and they are the only ones around that essentially mate their motor to the Darien fire pump to make it operate as a pump. The cost to replace it, it's currently ripped apart, is $18,000 to be done at Noroton Marina.
is this, given the age of the boat, is this something that you want to spend money on, or do we get to the point where even the boat itself just needs to be replaced? Because we've put motors in this before, I forget how.
We put motors in the boat about once every 7 years. The outboard motors are replaced about a 7 to 8 year life cycle. And same with this will be the third replacement on that. So this is about 10 years or so we've got out of each of these, the Westerbeek motor for the fire pump. It's just the salt air and the salt water beat it to death. It just, it doesn't get a life like any other fire pump would get. The boat is, it is 30 years old. We are looking to replace the boat down the road, but it is not looking to be replaced in the next year.
Okay, great.
To the extent you were going to replace the boat, whether 1, 2, 3, 4 years, is this a type of engine that can be transferred to the new boat?
So no, so that is, it mates to the fire pump. The fire pump stays in the boat. So essentially, if we sold the boat to maintain any kind of resale value with a fire pump in it, the motor goes with it. So in order for us to take the pump and the motor out would be kind of cost prohibitive, because you're essentially ripping out and you end up with a big hole in the bottom of the boat, because that's where the intake side is for the pump.
Okay.
How much would an entire new boat cost?
Somewhere between $500,000 to $750K.
And is the current boat, is it aluminum or is that
It is a
fiberglass?
Boston Whaler fiberglass boat, 27 foot,
Okay.
And how old did you say it was?
1989, the boat itself, yeah. And the fire pump and the motor is about 10 years old now.
Got to have it. I'm okay with this. Any other questions for them? Okay, motion to approve. Jim, second. Ron. All in favor? Okay, thank you, Don.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Okay. Next one, Jennifer stepped out, but this is for increased funding for the Bicentennial celebration in the amount of $10,000. My only question on that was, talking about the Bicentennial celebration. So this is a request to increase funding by $10,000 and take that out of contingency. What's the current budget and how much does this add to that?
Current budget is $5,000.
Okay, 5 to 15 then. Anything reason in particular for boosting that, or?
The first selectman just felt that the town should be supporting the Bicentennial more
Okay.
than the $5,000.
Okay. I'm okay with that. Does anyone have any questions?
I just have a question. I know originally they had certain fundraising targets.
Yes.
I do think the 5,000 was kind of pretty small to begin with, but is there any update in kind of how that's coming? I know we just started to get some letters at home, but is there?
Their target is $65,000 to $75,000, and as of last week, I think they had, I forget if it was 1,400 or 1,900.
Okay.
So they have been coming in response to that mailing that they did.
But they just started, right?
Yeah,
Right.
And that has, their goal hasn't changed, it's still the 75,000 that was
Correct.
put out there last.
Okay, motion to approve. Senator, second. Jim, all in favor? Great. Okay, thank you. So those are the transfers. So next up is a discussion of the 5-year forecast. So I'm going to pass around the slides that I had last year. just so that you all have them in front of you. We're not going to go through all these, but what I wanted to just talk briefly about was the plan for these this year. So you'll recall that in prior years, we had a 5-year forecast that was okay. It didn't have a lot of analysis or perspectives or so what's around it, and we used that for a long time. And so what I did last year was change that and departed from sort of a few-page forecast that we'd had used in the past and developed a set of slides that tried to bring some of this stuff to life and offer some analysis and mild controversy, which I'll avoid this time around. But the purpose of that was really to just provide a real perspective on the forecast as opposed to the mere tables of numbers that we had before. So what you're seeing here are the slides that I developed to do this last December. My proposal is to do something similar this year. I will probably cut back a bit on the detail, but I would like to maybe focus on, or even just have a page that does this, that shows what was different versus what I said last year. So we had some kind of forecast, and these were the things that I was worried about 12 months ago, and here's how that's played out over the last 12 months, and try to have a slide that just provides that summary. But one of the things I did want to point out is that you'll see in the third section, there are a few scenarios. And so if you look at slide 24, what I tried to do was lay out a few scenarios that I could test in the little model that we worked up, and you could see what those were. So one of them was Board of Education spending increases 2% above trend, or we have a giant project, or we have significant health insurance inflation, or we get zero reimbursement for excess cost for special education, or we get an imposition of teacher pension costs. These were all things that we had discussed last year as being potential events or scenarios that we could face. So it doesn't have to be decided at this meeting, but one of the things I would appreciate is that if anybody has any different scenarios or better scenarios that I could think about. One thing Jennifer has done is she updated the data set that I used to test all these scenarios, so that if we pick something, I can go in and pretty easily input that scenario or that change and take a look in terms of the outputs. And the outputs, as you'll see, were I tried to come up with what the impact on the property taxes of a $1.5 million house would be. So if you got a house that's worth that, you could expect your property taxes to evolve in this way if those scenarios, in fact, came to pass. So that's my plan for this. What I will do is over the next few weeks is I'm going to finalize pulling together the numbers that Jennifer has provided to me and get this set up. I'm also going to come up with a draft set of slides that I hope to pass around to everybody. But it would be great to hear from you all in terms of any changes that I might do to this deck, any different scenarios we might consider, or any of that sort of thing. But like I said, I do plan to run through a set of slides like this for the State of the Town address. Can you remind us what date that is? Is it
It's the second Monday in December, I think.
Let's see what date that would be. So that would be the 9th?
Yes.
Okay, so on the 9th, that'll be the day that we give those addresses, and that's when I would run through these slides. Does anybody have any comments on this now, or anything we could talk about?
John, just the only other sensitivity that I would add as a driver is intergovernmental.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that, obviously that's a chronic issue that we continue to contend with, although I think there's been some stabilization.
Okay.
I'd add that as a variable in slide 25.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
The only thing, John, I think might be helpful to look at is, I know you have some comments here on the grand list, but maybe also they're going to show the history of what's been going on with our mill rate.
Okay.
And I think maybe even comparing that to a couple of towns, just to give an idea of kind of where we sit. That was just one thing. And then another thing that I looked at as part of another project was, I think it might be helpful maybe to just look at within our grand list. I did some work with Anthony looking at sort of what's just been happening with the different level homes, just as we think about the tax burden, like what has a little bit of the shifting from the top quartile to the bottom quartile, just in terms of where that the taxes actually come from.
Okay, I like that. I had one in here that was residential versus commercial, or maybe I didn't put that in there, but I can certainly do that. Okay. Other input or ideas? Okay, so work in progress. I appreciate that. If you think of something to add on that, let me know, but certainly more to come on this at the next meeting. Okay. Discussion, next item, discussion and possible action on early redemption of bonds. Jim? Think a little bit about that.
Okay, so I put together a few pages for us to kind of walk through. The idea being, that we were looking at and going through our outstanding debt, and we noticed that we had a number of sort of currently callable high coupon bonds that matured in the next sort of 12 to 24 months. The problem is, as a standalone, to go out and do a refinancing deal, to refinance just $1 or $2 or $3 million worth of bonds, it's very sort of cost inefficient when you bake in what you pay for an underwriting discount, bond counsel, printing an OM, and all that. That really sort of eats into the financing, to the interest savings that we would realize. Sometimes, as you know, we've done refinancings in connection with sort of a larger new money bond issue, and there we can sort of amortize the costs and we can be a little bit more efficient. But so what we looked at were, I was kind of referred to page 1 here, is that there are bonds of about in the amount of $2.1 million that come due over the next 2 fiscal years, fiscal 21 and fiscal 22, that have coupons that range from 2 to 4%. And currently today, we have the general fund balance is approximately $20 million. So the idea was, could we use some of our current general fund balance to prepay bonds outside of the current fiscal year? Obviously, any bonds that come due in this fiscal year, we appropriate money as part of the budget process, and that money is available to repay it. But in terms of future years, that principal generally be appropriated in each of those years' budgets. So the idea is that we can use some of the money that we have on deposit today that's otherwise earning, just given where short-term investment rates are, a very sort of low rate of return, that we could go out and just outright redeem those bonds today and then realize, savings of what would otherwise be a 4% coupon versus a, very low sort of, basis point earnings off of our fund balance. If you flip to page 2 here.
Is that where are they at 4% coupons?
So some are 4%, some are 2%. We looked at bonds that are currently callable. That means we can redeem them at par. We don't have to pay a premium like 101.
And no penalty.
Yes, no penalty. We would have to pay accrued interest on it. But for example, bond number 1 right here, it was issued in February 2010. It's $1.44 million. It's got a 4% coupon that comes due in July of 2020, which is just after the beginning of our next fiscal year. So, and it's currently callable at 100%. So if you look at the dates that I've outlined underneath it, assuming that we approve this tonight, and assuming that the RTM approves it on the 21st, we could issue a redemption notice to the investors through the trustee as early as the 24th, and that redemption notice usually provides that we have to give the investors 30 days notice. So we could redeem the bond theoretically on November 23rd. Jen pointed out that's a Saturday, so we'll have to move it around a couple days, and I'm sure we'll work with the trustee to pick out the right date. But calling that bond on the November 23rd would then save us the 4% coupon between November 23rd and the maturity date on July 15th of 2020, which in this case totals just over $37,000. If you apply that same analysis to the second and third bonds, you can see it saves $5,000 and $12,000, which in total, this would save $49,000.
2 questions. These all have different maturities. Are they all callable at the same time, or is this
So they're all currently callable at par.
Right now. Okay.
And we could issue a notice today and redeem them in 30 days. Now, what I would point out is the first bond maturing in July 15 of 20, and the second bond in August of 2020, those are both in fiscal year 21. The third bond which is another 2% bond, is callable in August of '21, which is fiscal '22.
Yeah.
So it's $1,400,000, $300,000, $300,000.
Okay. So the sum total of this interest cost that you would be able to save, and this is the actual dollars of savings, not some kind of annualized interest cost of $54,000.
Correct. And then
You've got the preliminary cost down there of $5,000. Is that the actual cost of getting this done? So we really would net a savings of $49,600.
$5,000 should be the maximum that it would cost. That was based on a quote from bond counsel, which assumed entering into an escrow agreement. But as Jim and our FA said, we can probably do a cash defeasance, which would bring down the cost.
I'm not sure net savings before taking into account the opportunity lost on the investment income, right?
Right.
Correct,
Yes.
that's one thing that's
2
not being
million.
accounted for.
Right.
And when you look at our funds that are all generally invested kind of short term,
And what are they earning, just,
I think it says.
Between
under
1 to 2.
right, okay.
Well, but there's clearly a savings at that earning level versus what we're paying in these coupons.
Correct.
There's no doubt about that.
yeah.
And then just to be clear, the funds for doing this coming from fund balance, right?
Yeah, so they would come from fund balance. So our fund balance would generally be approximately $2 million less once we do this. Now, you saw like in the slide when we went through the budgeting, we're a little bit above sort of where our targeted fund balance is.
A lot, though.
Yeah,
And
I
after
think-
the surplus this year, and I want to talk about that in the financial report, but it's up at 17% now.
Versus our
So-
target, which is 12.
And target's 12, and so
Yes.
what's the total amount of excess fund balance in dollars?
I don't know offhand. I haven't looked at it that way.
Well, so what is the current fund balance now?
I'm sorry, what?
The current amount of fund balance right now? Is like $18 million, is that right?
No, we're about 20.
20, okay. Now, let's see, 20 million divided by, and you're saying it's at $20 million, and that as a percentage is what number?
At 17% of our budget, it's actually about 25 million, once we finish our fiscal 19 audit.
Okay, so we're sitting at $25 million, so we're talking about $2 million out of fund balance. And to be very clear, we still have plenty of fund balance after
Yes.
doing this, so there's no risk here in doing this that we would impair our fund balance in such a way that the prospect of having to tax to rebuild fund balance is even remotely possible at this stage. So I think that's an important thing to stress. This really is about saying we're interpreting that an excessive fund balance is in a sense that current taxpayers have been taxed too much, right? Because we had too much of a surplus and that money's sort of sitting in the bank. And so this is a way to say, well, we'll give some of that back, and the give back is going to be, we're not having to pay interest on money that's currently borrowed. Let's take the money out of fund balance and give the delta between, or that spread between that coupon and what this money would have earned and give that back to the taxpayers. It's not a gigantic amount of money, but it's just a good prudent practice to really think about not just our fund balance, but what we could do to take that down to what we said as a Board of Finance was the right level, and that's 12%.
So all else being equal, next year's debt service budget would be approximately $1.7 million less, 1.4 for the one bond and $300,000 for the other bond. Now, to the extent we felt like this surplus, we didn't want to spend a full $2 million of it, or we wanted to spread it out, we can always make a decision in next year to the extent we ever needed to replenish some or all of that. We can make that decision next year, but I think just given that the amount of excess that we have right now, this is a kind of prudent way to obtain close to $50,000 worth of savings.
Okay. So the other thing we need to do as part of this is we need to issue a new refunding resolution, because this is in fact not a refunding, but this is a redemption. And so in terms of the appropriation that is authorized in our prior resolution, it doesn't quite authorize this type of thing. And so because this again is an appropriation, this refunding resolution will have to go to the RTM. But by making the adjustment in this language to permit a redemption, which is not something we've done, at least not that I've been on this board, we need to modify that resolution. And so in your package is a reworded or revised refunding and redemption resolution. And that's what this is here. So any further comments on that, or do I have that right?
You have that right. The only other change was suggestion from Jim that I ran by bond counsel today. In the second whereas on the first page, second line, authorized to finance the refunding of certain. It's going to be authorized to finance the redemption of
Got
certain.
it. Right.
And so I think the
Or, I'm
idea.
sorry, so that should it be refunding or redemption? To the extent that, I don't know that we're going to have any refunding opportunities, maybe it's moot, but,
The first whereas will have refunding in it,
okay.
and the second one will say redemption.
Right.
Got it.
So if
And then
they-
when we do it next year, it'll be refunding and redemption.
All right, so this would be a permanent change in this resolution, that's fine.
And so, like, the original solution said, we can redeem up to 30 million of bonds to the extent we're issuing refunding bonds to fund that. This second paragraph just says we can redeem bonds without having issued refunding bonds to fund the redemption of the bonds.
And still the $30 million limit.
That's right. And is it 30 million between the two?
Right, whatever method, 30 million is the limit.
Okay.
So I would just say, like, we've looked at this, talked about this for a while, there's still 50,000 on the table. I think it's a great tool to kind of have for years to come, just as more of our bonds start to kind of roll off and become callable.
Right. I think it's a great idea, and anytime we can return some money to the taxpayer in whatever form, I think that's also a great idea. So, any other questions for Jennifer and Jim on this?
I have more comments than anything else. So, are we doing this because we're out of our swim lane with the $18 million and we're up to 20? Because when I kind of look at this thing, and I got the savings of $50,000, but when you throw the interest in, as Diane is, this comes out to $20,000. So the net is $20,000 here. I would ask a couple of things, which is, the number one thing I always think about is what happens in Hartford, right? So then we have a 2-year budget. I could be wrong. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. You have a 2-year budget. So I don't think that comes into play until we're looking at early 2021, right? Will they be in session next year to stuff down some of these costs that they've talked about for the last 3 years here, which are pensions, right, car taxes, those type of items? I mean, I thought we were kind of raising the fund balance a little bit to try to protect from that. To give back this for $20,000, to me, I don't see the advantages here.
Well, Rob, what I would say is the savings, the majority of the savings are coming from the 4% bond. And if you assume we're making sort of 50 basis points with the way the 10-year is and so forth, and short-term funds, knowing that we can't just buy treasuries and so forth.
Right.
I think even if you look at the opportunity cost of what we're earning, it's I think much higher than 20,000. And what I would say is, to the extent we want to get to next year, and we believe that the fund balance should be back to exactly where it is, we could choose as a board next year as part of the budget to still tax for the 1.5 and replenish the general fund if we thought we needed to. So therefore, the budget next year would be no lower or higher than what we thought it was. If we thought we needed to maintain this,
Right.
so we could decide next year to fund or replenish half of what we used or none of it. So we always have the ability, I think, to replenish fund balance. This is, now granted in this case, we've looked at this for a little while, but it's still.
So where are rates currently if we want to go back out into the market? Obviously lower than they were 6 months ago, right? So if you're, to your point, not a year from now, 6 months from now, roughly, we want to go back out and replenish that. What's the cost to replenish that in terms of interest?
If we were going to do a new 20-year bond issue, defer principal for 2 years, 10-year average life, would probably be in the sort of upper, 2.5.
Yeah, that's what we've been using as an assumption for costing
So
things out.
the debt we did earlier this year was like a 271, right? Somewhere around that
so.
number,
Yeah.
269, 271.
It'd be about 20 better.
Okay.
So again, we could save money on a 4% bond by just refinancing it, but to refinance a 1-year maturity, it's by itself.
I get it.
Yeah, I guess the philosophical point I might offer is that, look, fund balance is where it is, and it's too large relative to the floor that we set, which was 12%. And so what that means is the taxpayers have pre-funded X, and X could be some imposition of cost from Hartford, it could be some disaster, it could be whatever that is, but this basically says that taxpayers have pre-funded that. And I think the philosophy behind setting the 12% was to say that's the number in terms of a percentage of our budgeted revenues that we think prudence dictates should be set aside for that. Okay. Now, if we don't think that's enough, I think the debate is not to say, well, we're going to set 12%, but then we're going to arbitrarily sort of add to fund balance just so we feel a little bit better than 12%. I think what we need to do is to say, you know what, 12% is not enough. Let's reopen that discussion and say, let's have a real debate about what the level of prudence is with all this. My further philosophical point would be that for a few $1 million, there's going to be enough in fund balance to cover something that might be imposed by Hartford. But if Hartford came in and said, it's a $20 million imposition, right? They could do that. The state's in bad shape fiscally. As a general matter, what I would like to do is turn that right around and impose a special tax assessment on the citizenry, right? And I would like to say, we're having to do this because of what's been imposed by Hartford. If you don't like that, here are the phone numbers of the individuals who are responsible for this. You call them, right? The reality is that if you have a bunch of reserves, you can pay it out of the reserves, and none of this gets the attention among our taxpayers that it would need to. And so I would say at a 12% fund balance level and our general borrowing capacity, we can probably deal with anything that's sort of Hartford light in terms of what they might impose on the town. But the really big stuff, I actually don't think we should plan for that. I think we should go to our taxpayers and say, you guys need to pay attention to who you're voting for, right? Because that's what's being imposed by those individuals. So that would be my philosophical point. So further getting to the point that I think we should pass this resolution, and I do think that we should pursue this refunding.
Can you do 2 votes, one to pass the resolution and one to just formally say that you as a board want to redeem these 3?
We can do that. Okay, any further discussion or points on any of this? Okay, so we will start with a vote on the revised resolution, which permits both refunding and redemption. Can I get a motion on this resolution? Jim, second is, okay. All in favor? Okay, 6-0, thank you. The second one is to vote on proceeding with the redemption of these 3 bonds in the principal amounts of $1,445,000, $365,000, and $365,000. So for I don't have a handy total here, but there's not a total of the principal. Anyway, it's total interest savings gross of $54,607. Can I get a motion that we would proceed with those redemptions? Paul, second. Diana. All in favor? Okay, terrific. Thank you to Jennifer and Jim for thinking about this. It's a modest amount, but I think it's a good practice, and then that sets the table for being able to do these things in the future, which is good. Okay, we have a proposal for the calendar for next calendar year, 2020, that Jennifer has circulated. A couple of things to highlight on that. One of them is that I condensed the April meetings down to, well, the meeting that we had for voting on the mill rate. Historically, we've had 2 meetings for that, one to have a preliminary vote and then a final vote. And so I killed that meeting. We're just going to have 1 meeting. In fact, we've always killed that meeting in the past, at least the last several years. So I just took that out of the meeting schedule. We'll have 1 meeting after our budget work sessions, and the purpose of that will be to have a final budget vote and to set the mill rate, and that'll be on April 14th. The other change we made was we recognized that the February meeting was going to be in the middle of school break, so we've delayed that until the week after. The third thing I want to mention is that I'm going to take this calendar, I'm going to revise it, and I'm going to put in the Board of Education meetings so we know when those are and when we'll be having a joint session with them. I don't think that's on here, but I thought there was another one. Anyway, I'm going to add that to this calendar. The other thing I want to add on here is when the Board of Selectmen department reviews are. I think that's been a big change in our budget process where we'll have folks assigned to review those departments, and the way we'll do it by and large is to actually go to the department presentations that the Board of Selectmen has. So I want to add that on here, which I'll work with you and get that information. But I think if we're okay with this particular calendar, I don't think this needs a vote, or does it?
Yes, you do need
Be a
to.
vote. So we'll vote on this, and then what I'm going to do is add in these optional meetings, but I think they're important so that we can actually have all this in one spot. Okay, but these would be the official meetings of the Board of Finance. Jennifer, anything to add? Or?
Nope, that was all.
Okay, does anybody have any questions about the calendar? Okay, motion to approve. Rob, second. Diana? All in favor? Okay, great. Financial report, Jennifer.
Tax collections are doing very well. Building permits, we're keeping an eye on that. That's the same situation as prior years with the redevelopment projects, though I believe there is going to be a presentation on at least one of the projects at the RTM meeting next week. So we'll have some additional information at that point.
Can you remind me what we assumed in terms of those projects?
$750,000.
Well, I know, but was it all three projects would undergo the permitting this year, or was it?
Yes, I think it was 1/2 of the expected revenue of each of the three projects.
Okay, all right.
On the expenditure side, things are running as expected. Nothing strikes me as out of the ordinary. On page 5, state revenues. They are a little bit behind on sending our town aid road money. We usually get that earlier in the year, but it cannot be distributed until it's allocated by the State Bond Commission. So I'm not sure what the timing of that will be now. I think our schedule is a little different than it has been in the past. And then we're a little behind on receiving our $10,000 for the pilot on state-owned property.
Okay.
The only other item that I wanted to call your attention to is on page 10 and 11. These are our completed bond projects, and they have, some of them have surpluses. Town hall generator, $14,000, cafeteria, $52,000, Clocks Lane, $5,000, and the other two small amounts. So what I've done is I've highlighted my recommendation on where we reallocate that surplus. So we've already borrowed the funds, so we can reallocate the borrowed funds to a currently authorized project. I was trying to keep them within the same category, whether it's town, Board of Ed, or sewer. We don't have any authorized sewer projects, so my recommendation would be to use that $5,000 from the sewer project to pay down current year interest. If you agree with this, I will have bond counsel drop the appropriate resolution and we'll bring it in November.
Okay, and we'd need an appropriation for this.
Nope, the funds are already borrowed. It's just allocating the borrowed funds, so basically moving the revenue from these projects where it's not needed to authorized projects. So we would borrow on the first one, DPW garage renovation, the $14,000. If we reallocated it to the town hall generator, the town hall generator would still be a $325,000 authorization. We would borrow $14,000 less the next time we go out to issue.
Okay.
So the resolution, for instance, that we just passed for the town hall generator, it's up to that, up to an additional 75, but we do 75 less 14.
Right. Because this is still considered borrowed funds for that project.
Okay, I think all this makes sense. Any questions for Jennifer on this or the rest of the financial report?
I had a question on the revenue front, on the building permits. Do we have any more information on how the redevelopment projects are going?
No, there's going to be a presentation at the RTM meeting. I think that's going to be our next big source of information. We had a department head meeting this morning. There was some discussion about when the Noroton Heights Stop and Shop might be occurring, and between the building department and planning and zoning, they had two different timelines. So there's nothing solid yet.
Okay. Other questions?
Hey, Jen, have you seen final enrollment numbers?
No, I have not.
Okay. When do they usually filter in?
I think they prepare them in October.
October 1.
I've had a couple interesting conversations with other town Board of Finance. People have seen some pretty interesting drops in their numbers for enrollment. I'll leave it at that. I'm just kind of somebody had asked me what we had seen so far, and didn't have an answer. It wasn't finalized yet, so I'll just pass that back to him.
Other questions? Jim?
Yeah, I just had a question in terms of, on the reports, like once we decide to move these from one completed capital project to another, I think it might just be helpful to add another, just make sure you insert it into life to date.
I was actually expecting them to go off of the report once they are
Yeah, once it's cleaned
zeroed
up,
out,
you take these.
yeah.
Well, but I guess my question is, for instance, if we're going to move the Oxford land acquisition, the extra 5,300 up to the
Highland
Farms one, wherever that is, right here, we should just make sure that we put it in here and include it in the life-to-date bond proceeds.
Yes, yeah,
Right.
it will go in there
Okay.
because it'll be considered actual revenue into its new home.
Okay.
Yeah, but the Oxridge land acquisition box is going to go away.
Right.
Once that project.
Yes.
cleared out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, but the Highland Farms improvement, I just wanted to make
Yep.
sure we don't, it's a good way to keep track and make sure we don't overbond. And then a couple of things, I was looking at like the home's roof and skylight. We bonded for that back in April. They didn't do it this summer, I guess they're gonna do it next summer. And some of these other projects, like the Hindley roof, like can you remind us, how long do we have from when we actually approve something and when we bond for it until they have to spend it?
So there's no time limit on when you approve it and when they have to start spending. It could sit there for 10 years. When the clock starts ticking, when that first expenditure occurs. And then it's a limit of 18 months after the date of the original expenditure, or the project is placed in service, but that can't be more than 3 years after the original expenditure. So that's why on here we're having, and actually like on Home's roof and skylight, I gotta update it because it's not an estimated first expenditure. They actually had their first expenditure on that project January 15th of 2019. So we would have, if we hadn't already bonded that, we would have to bond it within 18 months of that first expenditure.
But I thought when we talked about the Oxford School, like for example, we can only bond a certain amount of time in advance of them actually starting to
So
spend.
to reimburse yourself, there's arbitrage requirements that on a bond issue, you have to spend, I think it's 10% within 6 months of the issue date, 25%. You basically have to have expended the whole thing. There's milestones along the way, but you have to have expended it within 18 months
Well, I
of
guess
when you
that was my
borrow.
question on some of these, like that we bonded.
Right,
We're not gonna be
and-
starting for a year and a half.
And we're okay right now. That's something that we do keep an eye on for each issue, what those milestones are and making sure that we've reached that percentage. Say that there was some big delay on the home's roof and skylight and Board of Ed says, actually, it's going to be delayed another year. What we would do is we'd say, okay, we already borrowed those funds. Let's allocate them to a project that is actually moving forward so that they will be spent to.
Do a new appropriation once
Right.
they finally decide to start.
Right, and then we would kind of reissue, it would move out of that and then we'd reissue for that project when it was back underway.
Yeah, maybe just a note when we start the budget process, I think we should ask the Board of Ed, when they give us their projects, there should be, and I don't know how this never kind of gets looked at, but they should have a date. This is when we actually plan to start the project. Yeah. Or begin bidding it out and ordering the stuff, because to bond a year and a half in advance, I have to track
And-
arbitrage rules and so
Right,
forth. That's a lot
and
of
that,
unnecessary.
before we go out and issue, when we're sizing, we do touch base with all the departments that are running their projects and say, what's it looking like? When do you think you're gonna start? When do you think you're gonna finish? What's your cash flow? So this one is a little bit out of whack.
Do we still have that one pager for capital projects?
The project summary, we have
Yeah.
that for town projects.
For town projects. Can we get that on the BOP side?
I can speak with Kate and Jamie and see who would be the appropriate person to reach out to over there and request that they complete that for the
Well,
projects.
certainly for the Oxridge elementary school, we're about to have that. So there's going to be a kind of a running total that gives you a sense of where we spent, how far we are from budget, what the change orders have been. We did that for the Public Works garage. We're not quite ready to do it for the school because we haven't really spent any money, but we're going to have that. So on that project, absolutely.
I was thinking for just any capital project on the side too. Should have the one pager. Explanation was for, add the line that you just talked about, when expected to start.
And I think we have that on, I think we
so,
added
too.
that to the town.
Hey, it's the
project
absolute
page.
right thing to have on there and the right information to have. Everybody always assumes when you come in, it's like, oh, it's just a project of the generator. And like, they all know what it is, and then we kind of sit there going, what's this for? So if we can push that along, that would be wonderful.
Okay, other questions on the financial report? Okay, approval of minutes. So these are the minutes from the September 17th meeting that we just had.
Yeah, there's a couple of typos, one on page 1.
Is this just the letter numbering of the transfers? Is that?
No, it was in the paragraph beginning Darien Fire Chief Pansera, which caused the account to go over budget.
Yep.
That's one. And then on the next page, there's the U and the A need to be reversed in the word because in the second to last paragraph. 5,000 a few years ago because.
Okay. And then the lettering of the transfers that restart today at the bottom of the front page.
I missed that. Where's that?
But just where the very last transfer, DFD facility repair maintenance, it starts with the letter A. It should be the letter G.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
And then.
You know, I think that's actually,
Or unless it's not a transfer.
it's now starting the discussion of A. So A is the DFD facility maintenance repair, and now,
Oh, okay, well, maybe then, fine. I mean, it's a minor thing. Maybe just,
maybe we can
well,
offset
just
it
do the
somehow.
transfers and make them dot points or something.
Yeah.
It's just confusing there. And then in the chairman's report on page 7, it says Superintendent of Schools, dry Addley. Okay, he doesn't strike me as a particularly dry individual, but maybe that was an apt description. So that should say doctor. But that was the only other change I had.
And I have those all marked on here, actually, if you want to just take them, Joe.
Okay.
Or I can pass them down.
And we're about to get to that. Okay. Motion to approve the minutes as acted. Rob, second. Paul, all in favor? And I guess we're all here, so we can all vote on that. 6-0. Okay, thank you. Okay, special assignments and committee reports. So, Paul, you had a pension committee meeting. You want to
Yeah.
touch briefly on that?
We had our quarterly pension meeting this afternoon at 4 o'clock, lasted about an hour. The pension fund manager has been underperforming his benchmark for the past couple quarters, and we thought the fees might be a little high, both compared to our surrounding towns.
This is still Boston Partners, those guys are
Yes,
doing?
so we're taking a look at, we are going to take a look at that and take a look at how other towns are allocating money in their pension fund, and if they have guidelines or, in general, how their pension funds are being managed. There is no concern over being underfunded or anything like that. It's just a performance issue.
Okay.
And our actuarial report, I believe, will be January.
Right.
And just to comment on that, I'm not sure, I don't have the details, but I think the fee issue in terms of some comparative analysis would be worthy. But I certainly think the period that you're judging an underperformance is meaningless. So I would stay the course.
Well, we've asked them to go back a decade.
Well, that's
And
a meaningful
track
period. That's a meaningful period, sure. But the last 2 quarters is meaningless.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I was on that board for, I guess, 8 years, and they did pretty well for quite a while. I'm not to say we shouldn't take a fresh look at it or ask questions, but I think Jamie's right in terms of watching the time horizon when you.
Well, the only reason I raised it
triggers
is
a
not
change.
for any other statement. I mean, I've spent my life in the investment business. It's just simply that I don't want that to be the predicate for some overarching review. But certainly to review the fees is always something we should do.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Other questions for Paul? Okay, Pear Tree Point Building Committee.
Yes, so Pear Tree Point. Well, the Parks and Recs issued many of you may have received it, but they issued a frequently asked questions memo that was sent to town residents in response to some public outcry subsequent to a very vocal group opposing any kind of a building on Pear Tree Point Beach. And I think that did a lot to allow people to sort of look at all sides. The question, the committee has received a number of letters in support of the progress so far, and then there's still a very vocal group that is opposed. In the last meeting, I was not in attendance, I was away, but in the last meeting, the architects actually brought a three-dimensional model of the proposed building, which I believe is going to be available.
It is actually downstairs.
It's actually
in
downstairs.
The front entrance.
Yeah.
Great, so you can go have a look at that, and I think that also helped to both just clarify a little bit what the actual proposal is, which was very confusing based on some of the information that was circulating in town. So it remains to be seen where things are going to land, but the process continues. Right now, there are a lot of discussions going on to really test the feasibility of what has been proposed, just to be sure that all the assumptions that we've made to date are actually the correct assumptions with respect to all the different agencies involved in regulating them. So there's a lot of meetings taking place with everyone from PNC to DEEP to various regulatory bodies to assure that the variances that would be required are obtainable. And so there's another meeting to take place on the 23rd. I think it's just continuing down the process and not without bumps in the road, for sure. But I think that the actual public debate is healthy and people are definitely getting out there and airing their perspective. There has been I think quite a bit of misinformation that has circulated, and I think that the frequently asked questions that did help to clarify that.
So where are you in terms of getting to a decision where we say, ready to go, let's actually start building? So where are we on that timeline?
I think so we are in the process now of seeking all the various approvals, and if those approvals were the sort of the verbal approvals from the various bodies before they go in and actually make the formal applications. But assuming that those all go according to plan, then there would be the whole process. I'm sure it has to go to the RTM, it has to go to a bunch of other people before we could actually start building.
Okay.
I don't think anybody would give you a specific timeline at this point.
All right. Other questions for Diana?
Well, in terms of like budget, is there sort of a bookend that people are discussing, or?
I think the most recent budget, that the cost of the proposal as it stands right now is about $2.5 million. Ballpark, and that's all in, and that's all aspects. That includes the boat launch, it includes the renovations to the beach, the improving the picnic area, the building.
Okay.
I think it's 2.5 to 3, but I'm looking more like 2.5.
All right. The only other report, I guess, is on the Oxridge Building Committee. Not much to say there. They're continuing to make progress. One of the things they are doing is trying to post all their materials, and that's a pretty aggressive effort, so we need the design work. Anybody has any questions on that, certainly available on the Board of Education website, so please take a look at that. That's it for committee reports, special assignments, unless anybody else had anything to add. Okay, Chairman's report, a couple of things on here. One of them is we had a brief discussion of the community values in the last meeting. I missed a lot of that because I was late, but I know we didn't get to a resolution on that. Jamie Stevenson sent around some community values examples from other towns, and just in reflecting on that, it struck me that maybe our offering on something like this for the Board of Selectmen to consider, just as a reminder, they're the ones who've taken the initiative to write this and to try and develop this for the town. And what they're doing is they're looking for other boards and entities in town to supply language, and that's going to go into their hopper. They're going to mix it around and come up with a community value statement that they would issue and the first selectman would sponsor. The 2 points that I think we could make or offer into that, I think, are around one, collegiality, comedy, collaboration, to use some of your words, Jamie. I think that's actually a pretty important thing, and there have been times when we've done that very well across all boards in town, and there are times when we've done that less well. And so I think having a pithily worded statement that says we will strive for those things in all of our dealings as a board and with other boards in town, I think that actually is an important thing that frankly we could show others anytime there is a point where there's a lack of collegiality or collaboration or comedy, and say, you know what, community value says that that's not something we're supposed to do, and we should strive to stay away from violating those principles. The second one I think that is important is simply a statement around financial prudence and keeping in mind the interests of the taxpayer. I don't think that statement is overly binding, but I do think it actually puts a stake in the ground, particularly for the Board of Finance, that says we're going to represent that particular constituency. Board of Education represents people who want to spend money on education. Board of Selectmen for town services, people want to spend money. This board, I think, represents the other side of that ledger in a way those two boards simply cannot, and that is for us to put a stake in the ground that said, in our deliberations, we will do our part to maintain prudent financial management for this town with particular attention to the needs of the taxpayer, and to simply say that. So in my thinking about all this and just reflecting on it, those 2 points around collegiality, collaboration, and comedy I think are important, and then financial prudence with the interests of the taxpayer in mind also strikes me as important, and that we could word those in a fairly short manner and pop that over to the Board of Selectmen and let them ponder that and include or not as they see fit.
Well, let me comment again. I don't want to spend any more time on it than I did. The minutes actually contain some quotes from the last meeting where I indicated I thought it was bureaucracy run amok, and
I hope you still stand by that.
Contained a series of good feel-good bromides, I think were the quotes. So I'll stand by that.
Captured in the minutes, I would say.
Yes. But I think the point that I did make last time, and I want to make sure we understand it, is, are these not in fact contained with various purpose-driven statements in the charter about various boards and commission, in this case the Board of Finance? And I suspect they are. Whether they are implicit or explicit, I was urging everyone to make sure that we reviewed them. I think it is in the charter, de jure and de facto statements of purpose, no question. So I stand by my comments. This might be a feel-good exercise, and I certainly don't want to waste any more time on it.
Okay, thank you. Other comments?
I would just caution that whatever we say about financial prudence and representing the taxpayer be done in a way that doesn't hamstring us at all, in the sense that there are many times when we're actually encouraging the various bodies in town to take a long-term view as they are thinking about investment and expenditure. And so just to make sure that it's worded in such a way that it doesn't constrict that.
I agree completely. Part of the reason we worded our fund balance policy the way we did was to simply avoid that sort of handcuffing. And so, in the best judgment of the Board of Finance, strive to encourage, hope for that's all language that I would want to put in here where it expresses a point of view without being something that a third party could interpret as binding in some fashion. So these are all things we're striving to do as opposed to being held to account over in any kind of technical or legalistic way. Okay. Next item is, at the next meeting, there will be another vote for officers for the Board of Finance. One of the things we're going to do is reset some of our committees. I know Diana would be rolling off the Pear Tree Point building committee since she won't be on the Board of Finance anymore, and so we're going to do all that reshuffling at the next meeting and have a discussion about all that. I think the last thing I just want to mention is that we have a couple of retirements from this board, and I just wanted to spend a brief minute acknowledging the service of these two colleagues. Diana McGuire has been a great member of the board for your 4-year term and have taken a lot of special assignments on, one of them being secretary of the board, which we very much appreciate, a happy role that I think I filled for 3 or 4 years myself, and service on this building committee. And it's been terrific to have someone of your caliber, intensity, and forthrightness to be part of all that. And to take on those assignments has been very much appreciated, and to have you as part of this board has been equally appreciated. And I want to just personally thank you for that. Senator McLaughlin has been on this board. I think you are the second most tenured member of the board behind myself, and I guess that says bad things that I've volunteered and done this for so long, but in any case, I have to say it has been a true privilege serving with you on this board. I have learned a lot, both in terms of style and presentation, but also history, what's going on in Hartford, how to think about things in a clear way, how to ask questions, how to deal with the answers to those questions, and how to collaborate in a both an effective way and frankly in a fun way. And to have you as part of this and a part of all of our discussions has been extraordinarily enriching and something that I personally have benefited from and enjoyed. And I just want to make sure that you have my, just like with Diana, that you have my gratitude for your 8 years of service on this board that was made vastly more august by your presence and input. Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to miss the chance to say something to that because you're very grand to say that. And of course, I'm not speaking to the House. I guess I'm speaking to the people watching. I went to the Republican Town Committee at my request to indicate that I wasn't going to run again. I could have done that by a phone call. But I did it because I wanted the town committee members to understand in the discharge of their duties they had some really important responsibilities. And you know, I'm serving in this capacity, really kind of a backbencher kind of a role that I've played. But I've tried to be constructive and not in any way a gadfly. And it's a fine line sometimes. I don't like to waste my time, and I want to contribute. And so I've had some opportunities at times to make some suggestions about nitpicking. And I actually have to say, because this is perhaps inconsequential to people watching, but the manner in which this committee is functioning today, in terms of our time management, in terms of a focus on things that matter, in terms of stepping aside to think out loud about policy, codifying policy, doing some things that I think are really important, as opposed to some of the transfers that occur, which, you know, I know we have to do them, but they're not the highlight of the meetings for me, has really been commendable. And I say this openly to everybody. I had the pleasure to serve in Hartford for 10 years in the legislature as a very young man. I guess this is a bookend to me. But the privilege to serve is something I want to just share with everybody from my heart. It's an opportunity for any other number of people that are watching to put their hand up and be more engaged and understand how our government works. We are our government, and I've been a witness to it in this last chapter of my involvement. And then the last thing I want to say is we have such great people here that serve our town. Not just the elected officials. Jennifer, you know, you play a quiet but extremely effective role as did Kate Bush before you, serving this committee in my tenure. And then I don't want to go through everybody one by one, but it would be just a terrific lost opportunity. I've had the pleasure of serving with John Zagrodsky. This is not some kind of lionization of one man, but had our party, I'm a Republican, elected Bob Stefanowski in the last election cycle, may not be known to a lot of people, but I certainly would have been advocating for John, JZ as we call him, to be our budget director. He had the stuff to do it. I think he would have been asked. He is a man of stature, probity, depth, and always has his brief beyond the call of duty. And I just want to make sure I say thank you. I have the privilege of serving with you, JZ. So thank you all.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that a lot. Appreciate that very much. Okay. Anyway, but thank you to our two colleagues. You will definitely be missed, and we look forward to Dan Baumgartner, who's there in the audience, who will be joining us. Taylor Carter will also as well. And you all have these giant clown-sized shoes to fill, so get ready. But again, thank you to everyone. Okay. I think, unless anyone else had any comments for the good of the order, that was all I had for our meeting tonight. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Again, thank you to everyone. Thank you to everyone for coming tonight, and to our departing colleagues. I appreciate it. Motion to adjourn, please. And I will only take that motion from one member of this board, and I'm going to get a second from the other. So you guys get to arm wrestle as to who's going to make that
You want
motion.
to do the motion or the second?
Diana raised her hand. She's going to make the motion. The senator is going to make the second one. All in favor, team? We stand adjourned.